So it's not about teaching them anything, but it is about awakening that curiosity, and making them
Yes,
passionate, and
yes.
creating that excitement and that sense of belonging, right? Of saying like, wow, how cool is that?
Miriam Tocino, thank you for joining me today. How are you? Good morning
Thank
with
you,
the
Michael.
sunrise
This
all the
is
way.
exciting. Thank you for having me.
Of course, you're in the sunrise all the way from Spain, right?
Yes, yes, it's about the sun. The sun is going to be rising as we speak today.
Wonderful, amazing. So I can't wait to see the light change. Thank you for taking this call so early. I really appreciate it. Miriam, before we talk about, enabling children with superhuman tools to interact with computers and technology, I'd love to first hear a little about you because your journey is very weird. It's very nonlinear. You're from Netherlands. Right now, you're in Spain. You were an architect turned into a software engineer, turned into a book author, uh, passionate about helping kids, interact with really, 2020 and 2021, and where the world is moving in terms of technology. So I've spoken enough. Miriam, share with me a little bit about who you are and how do you get sucked into this whole world of technology?
So here's the story, Michael, because today we're going to be talking about how technology is now a big part of my life and the work I do as a writer. But I haven't always been this passionate about the world of computers. And my dad always wanted me to go into computer science. And he used to say, Miriam is the future, right? And now we know he was right and that I completely missed the point. But as a child, I thought that computers were gray and boring. And well, instead, I went into college and I studied architecture. And it wasn't until I was 30 years old that I started to get interested in technology, and I taught myself how to code. And I discovered that working with computers could be something fun, full of creativity, and that allowed me to help other people around me, which were the things that drew me in the first place into architecture and not into computer science.
What
So,
is the moment? But why, studying to be an architecture is, a feat on its own, right? Uh, what prompts you to then say, okay, you know what, I'm actually going to go and also teach myself how to code, which is a whole other feat, a scary one at that, right? At the end, it's very rewarding, but it is a scary experience for those who don't have enough guidance. But what prompts you to go there, and what was the experience like?
okay, so there were two main things that actually prompted me to make a switch. The first one was that uh, at the beginning I was very happy being an architect, but then after a while, and we were winning competitions and I was working in exciting projects and it was all fun, right, during my 20s. But at some point, well, the studios in which I was working, it was very demanding. So I worked in 4 different countries, and in every place where I went, well, there were very long hours, no weekends. It was
Yeah.
really, really, really hard, and I didn't see myself doing that for my whole life. I said, like, look, this is actually not working. I tried in 4 different countries. How is this possible? Like, I don't want to play this game. That was one of the things, right? And on the other hand, at the same time, I met my husband now, before, so boyfriend, right? And we started dating, and he's a programmer. He's an artificial intelligence programmer, a video games programmer, and I was already living with him. And the weekend would come and I would say, okay, so what are we going to do? Right. And he was like, look, I have this feature in my engine that I want to. I'm like, wow, like he's really passionate about this thing. Maybe I should try to, you're right. Because I think, and here's something that didn't, I think we don't talk much about when it's about to choose a career for us, which is like, in order to be successful as an architect, you need a client, right? You need to build
Mhm.
things for someone, like your designs will stay in paper if you don't actually get that client. But what
Right.
I discovered with coding was like, if I had an idea, like, of course you want people to use your app, to use your invention, to use your thing, but there are so many problems in the world that can actually be solved through technology, that it is a huge opportunity to actually be doing something creative that actually help other people around in an easier way and more simple way, more straightforward, you could say, than being an architect, right? And that was
Hmm.
something that I was not communicated as a child, right?
Right. I think that what you're
So
touching here is on two of the things that excite me most about technology, which is one, you know, it is about taking matters to your own hands, right? The idea isn't left on the piece of paper. It's not left as an idea for somebody else to go and implement. It really gives life to it in an interactive form. You know, it doesn't necessarily as a programmer, you don't necessarily have to be the one to bring it all the way to production and to millions of people, but you can at least build something that is much more meaningful and showcasing a much more meaningful way than it is on a piece of paper. But the second piece of it, and what I'm hearing here, is that you're able to take that whole creativity piece and that whole artistry side of architecture and bring that into the programming life. And I think a lot of people see programming and technology as very robotic zeros and ones, but at the end, pretty much every programmer that I talk to talks about it as a form of art. It's really
yes.
about being an artist, and no two programmers will you can build the same program in so many different ways, and the way in which you design it and do it, that's an art of its own.
Yes, I think it is time that actually we reframe the way that we talk about computer science. Because if I talking with my
Yes,
husband as
yes,
well about this, right? Like the reason why I went into architecture is because architecture is sold to you as an interdisciplinary career,
yes.
right? And I was like, okay, so I studied design, I studied creativity, I studied structure, I studied mathematics, I studied physics, but I also studied drawing and sketching and, bringing your ideas to life, right? And I
Right,
thought, how is it that we are, and I think about this a lot right now, because I think we are in a moment in which architects have the challenge to actually create our environment, but our environment right now is as digital as it is in real life. And I think about
right.
what if we place ourselves with the minds of architects, to create the digital future that we want to see, right? And have that approach in a more broad sense, and not only
100%.
from a computer science and a technical aspect, right? I think slowly we are getting there. I want to be optimistic about this, right? But I do think that in order to do that, there's still a long way to go to actually say, look, computer science is not, a little bit of the science. I don't really like the term, right? Because it kind of divides groups of people, and I think we need to come up with a better wording as well to actually, you could say, sell it to our children, right? Or to the next
I completely
generations.
agree. And I have to give a very short anecdote, because I was recently speaking to a school, to a middle school, about they told me that they want to have this fun week where kids study, they want to become programmers, right? It's a week to get them to really sign up for that computer science class or that programming class. And so the first thing that they tell me is, and we're gonna call it a week of computer science education. And I heard that, and I was like, if I'm a middle schooler, I don't want to go to a week of computer science education. That's the last thing that I want to do. I want to go to a fun week of problem solving. I want to go for the art of interacting with screens, or typing, whatever it is. But I completely agree with you that I think there's a huge dissonance right now with between educators and between kids, what gets them excited. And I'm seeing, my niece is growing up very young, but the things that get them excited are things, if I were to give them titles the way that educators give titles to these activities today, I don't think they'd be as excited. And so I completely agree. And Miriam, that really, is a great segue to what you're working on now, in the book that you wrote, and the things that you're excited about, which is not just how people are interacting with computers, it's specifically how kids are seeing the evolving world and what gets them excited about it. So let's start all the way
I
with
know.
the pain point,
I want to add to that. I normally say,
please.
Michael, I normally say that understanding computers is a superpower, and it is not
Right,
about every child becoming a computer scientist or a
right,
programmer in the future, right? But it is like we need to give them the sense that knowing how computers work and the technology around us, functions, will actually become an important part of their toolkit to create their
Yes.
own world in whatever way they choose. So one day you are painting with brushes and paintings, and the other day you are customizing liquid templates in Shopify, right? Like, this is it, like, and this thing, it's here to stay. This is not going
Right.
away anytime
A
soon,
hundred percent.
right? So it's not
100%.
about whether, I don't think, we are anymore in this place where we want our children to become computer scientists, but as parents and as educators, we need to teach them about the world around them. It's part of their culture, it's part of their upbringing. I was in that position that I said, look, if my kid is young enough to interact with a screen, he's young enough to know what's going on behind that screen and who is responsible for that, and who is building that for him. I think as little as 3-4 years old, we could start having those conversations. So our kids, they don't see technology only as consumers, but they start seeing it as creators, right?
Right. No,
From a
I
very
I
young
agree a
age.
hundred percent, and I think the motivation for this, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, but I think that the motivation for this is saying, okay, now if before people that were interacting with computers, you would call them computer scientists, they're the people that are in the forefront of these technologies. But today, in order to just be a successful global citizen, starting in 2020, moving forwards, you have to be comfortable with these adapting technologies. You have to be relevant using these technologies. And so by understanding it, you're increasing the likelihood that you'll be able to adapt and be on the forefront of even just as a consumer, even if you're not going to be the next engineer, right? Just as a consumer, you have to understand and be comfortable adapting. And I think that what we're seeing now with older generations and the gap that is continuing to become greater is this lack of adaptivity and really not understanding what's going there, having it being a scary experience, and then not being adaptive to actually going and experimenting. One of the things that I always tell my grandparents is, you can't really ruin anything, right? Sometimes they're scared of pressing some buttons as if like something will break, right? Like it will shatter. But in my mind, nothing will shatter. The worst case is you do a restart. But it's a
Yes.
different mindset. It's a different mentality. Miriam, talk to me about kids. Talk to me about communicating technology and screens to kids and how you see it needs to be done.
For me, it was very important not to use the screens from the very beginning, and that's why when 3 years ago, when I had my baby, I started thinking about, okay, and I was a programming teacher, right? So when I got my baby, I was a programming teacher. I taught hundreds of students how to switch their careers into tech, right? That's what I was doing. And then I got pregnant and I had this son, and I kind of naturally transitioned into thinking, how am I gonna actually talk about my kid about computers and introducing him to this world? And for me, it was very important, first, that there was no screens, and second, that it was really simple. I thought, okay, how can I bring some of the elements that I used in my teaching and help other people introduce this topic to their children and start talking with them at home? That was really the key thing for me when I started this project. I had in mind this vision about how do I get parents and kids in bed talking about computers. That was my, if
Right,
I can get that, like, my work is done here, right? So I thought, okay, you know what, we're already reading books to him, he loves books, stories are
right,
powerful, and also parents are normally so busy, that it's like, I didn't want to give them a book that they had to prepare for, right? And I was like, look, today I'm going to read this book about farms and animals. Tomorrow we'll read a book about computers and technology. So this is how Zerus and Ona were born. They are a 0 and a 1. They live inside your computer, and they live in the binary world, and they share their adventures, right? So it's a book series. It comes with a parent guide at the end that also older kids are
amazing.
reading. And so, but it's like, okay, how can we actually make this transition natural to our children and also for educators and parents? And again, it's not about being educational, right? That was also for me the key point for the project. I was like, how educative I want this to be. I think our children are going to be lifelong learners. We are seeing it right now, right? So it's not about teaching them anything, but it is about awakening that curiosity, and making them
Yes.
passionate, and
Yes.
creating that excitement and that sense of belonging, right? Of saying like, wow, how cool is that? And now, yesterday, for example, we were not even reading the book to him, like my child, of course, he knows a lot about Zerus Ona, and he doesn't much read the book anymore, but he wants to create his own stories about what's going on inside the computer with Zerus Ona. And every night they go to somewhere different, and then he's like, oh, and what happens there, daddy? What happens there, mommy? And he's having this world in his mind. I think it's amazing, right? Like to grow like
Unbelievable.
that, you know.
Unbelievable. I think that at the end, I was very lucky to grow up in a place where my curiosity was, sparked pretty early on, and so, I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I think that at the end, that's really what drives me, is that curiosity. And I think that, really the differentiator with a lot of people, you're saying some of the greatest minds and the greatest innovators at the end, it's not necessarily about the money, or it's not about the power, it's about that curiosity. I'm thinking, why does Elon Musk have, 6 different ventures, each of them in different domains, that are making such a strong impact? Uh, at the end, he's just a curious person. He wants to learn. Now he's, an innovator, but you can have also people that are engineers that are curious. You can have people that are architects that are curious, or educators that are curious. But it's at the end, it's all about that lifelong learning and adaptivity. And so I think that's fascinating. What techniques did you find yourself having to use as you're writing this book for kids? Because you're not writing, a wiki how that sparks curiosity for teens. You're writing a children's book about computers and about the internals of computers. So, what is that process like for you?
This is a great question, Mike. So I started when he was 6 months old, right? And our
Hmm.
child didn't sleep much. So the beginnings of the project was done in a very kind of sleep deprived situation.
Wow.
And I think that was actually a positive thing for the project, because at the end of the day, I'm talking with a 0 and a 1, right? So if you are really in a very rational state, that might not work.
Right.
So
I
the
love that.
very beginning, was that, well, I kind of, as I said, I left my architecture career some years ago, and after I got my child, he was not sleeping, and I finally decided, like, look, my work was to teach coding, programming to 25 people
Right.
who decided to quit their careers and make a switch. And yesterday at 3 a.m. in the morning, I was walking around my block, trying to make these babies. I cannot do this, right? Like, I thought, like, okay, I'm just gonna stay home, for let's see how this takes, but I cannot teach other how to code in this state, and be responsible for the future. So
Right.
I stayed at home, and then I discovered that actually I was missing some of that creativity and quick thinking and that I experienced as an architect, right? So I started journaling a lot, and I started with the Artist's Way, the book from Julia Cameron. Maybe you've heard from it. And
Hmm.
she gives you 2 different tools. So she gives you morning pages, which is like you wake up and you write 3 pages, like handwritten, like non-stop, just,
Hmm.
brain dumping
Yeah.
the whole thing. And then she also says that once a week you need to have like an artist date. So I started doing that. And the first pages were very boring. The first pages were like, okay, why is my baby not sleeping? Like my life is such a chaos. I want to go back to teaching, where is my life, and so on. But then at some point I started, okay, like, and of course you first need to go through those pages, that's what they tell you in the book as well, to clear that stuff up, and then be in
I
that
love it.
mind state, which is like empty. And so one day I was talking about how my creativity was damaged, and then that same night I talked with my husband about the whole, how are we going to teach him about technology, computers, and then one day Zerus and Ona were on the page, and then ever since they've been there, right?
I
And
love it.
now I don't write 3 pages, but I might write 1 page in the morning, and every time that I need to create a new story, and it comes from that place. And here I want to say something that I discovered and that it can resonate with some people. And I don't think we speak much about this, which is that the huge role that intuition plays in all this, right? Like all the stories for Zerus Ona, they are not coming from a place of pushing, right? Or like forcing stuff, like I first need to go to a place in which I'm like very much, in the side, and I let them ride, take the
Right.
ride, lead the ride, right? So, how do you do that? I think we don't have time for 20 minutes, but I see many people, being said like, look, like fight your dreams, like, and for me, I had to slow down. And I think that's actually the positive aspect that I had about being sleep deprived, and having that break in my
Interesting.
career, which is like sometimes you need to stop and slow down to speed up again, right?
I love
And
that.
come from that
I love
moment
that.
of,
I love that.
yeah. Does that answer
I
your
think that
question?
100%. And I think that, a lot of people are going to come out of this pandemic, myself included, and are going to to feel much more comfortable with the decisions they're going to make. I think that a lot of my friends that I've spoken with, everybody's plans have completely changed throughout the pandemic, and a lot of people were forced, to slow down a bit and to go a little bit more internal and to spend some meaningful time thinking, whether they like it or not. But at the end, I think that a lot of people are going to come out and have much more clarity as to what they want to be doing and where they want to be spending their time. And I know that I also am already starting to reflect on some of these insights that I've gained throughout COVID. Miriam, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time. Thank you for joining me here. I wish we had more time to. I have 50 more questions I want to ask you, but for now, the most important question I have left is three words that you would use to describe yourself.
I'm passionate about life and work, and I think this is becoming even more important in these days in which we are at the moment. I'm also an optimistic problem solver. So you
Yes,
mentioned before about the school, it's not about, that problem solver, which is fine, problem solving week, but I think having designing things with a positive narrative, optimistic narrative is becoming more important right now, also as ever before. And I think discipline is another one.
yes.
So I'm gonna leave it here there.
I love it. Miriam, thank you so much.
Thank you,
Stay safe and
Michael.
stay healthy. I can't wait to, first of all, read the books myself. Second of all, to share these books with my nieces and with other kids as well. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. I think it's incredibly important. I think it's one of the most important things that educators can do, where we are today in preparation for a world that nobody knows what it's going to be like. In the 1900s, when people used to educate kids, they used to know pretty much what the kids are going to experience in their lifetime and what mentality they need to be prepared for. And I think the most exhilarating thing here is that we don't know what we need to prepare for. We don't know what adversities are going to strike. We don't know what opportunities are going to come to us. And so I think that what you're doing here is extremely, extremely important. Thank you very much, and stay safe and stay healthy.
Tell me how it's going. We keep in touch.
Wonderful.
Thank you.